Hey, good morning, everybody. I'm back a little bit late today. I was trying to put the finishing pieces together on today's show to try to give you as much nutrient-dense information and updates as possible, up to the minute, up to the second, up to the nano moment. This is Robert Phoenix broadcasting to you live from the beautiful hill country here in somewhat chilly Texas. All right, the crew's assembling here. Let's see, we got DJ MC, Lisa Marie, Kestrel, Fifth Wall, the lovely Intelligent Jonas, Ian Barber, here he is, 10 Dragon 14, hi, back at you. Danica Rose, there's Kurt Judkins, my man Steve, what's going on, Steve? Thorby door, Tamara Garth, hope you're staying warm up there, Tamara. I bet you are in your cozy little underground bunker. Coolest thing I've heard in a long time. Joe Mama, there's Lils W.C. Ray. Boy howdy. Boy howdy was a phrase from, what was it? Either Cream or Crawdaddy magazine. Boy howdy was, they used that a lot. I forget which magazine it was. Marley McNichols, good to see you. There's Jennifer Rubin. Morning, Jennifer. Let's see, Lils, if I didn't catch you, I'm catching you on the way back. Mary Grether, Double V, Ani Brito, the wench with the wrench. There's Ryan, Uncle Glenn, Jan Augenstein. Nice to see you, Jan. Another person who's living in a rather not so temperate environment. Hope you're staying warm. Frank Bry, what's going on, brother? Good to see you. Nicholas Grimm. Nicholas Grimm. I sent you a response to your email, Nicholas. I hope you got that. Marie Demare, Ray Ann Robinette. Nice to see you, Ray Ann. Cream magazine. There we go. You guys know your shit, man. Boy howdy was used in Cream magazines. Back in the day, it was Cream and Circus. Those were sort of the two non-cerebral rock and roll magazines. Rolling Stone was cerebral. This is where you got people like Lester Bangs and Kurt Loder writing. You know, Kurt Loder's like in his 70s now. Isn't that mind-blowing? Like the guy that launched MTV is in his 70s now. Let's see. Who else do we have here? Any new arrivals? I'm topping out about 54. Yeah, that was my thing. I'd buy those magazines. I'd read about. I remember one time I copped a free magazine at the Warehouse. Remember the Warehouse records and tapes?
You remember the Warehouse record and tapes? You remember when we used to buy those 8-track cassettes?
My old man had a really sweet white Cadillac Coupe de Ville with red leather interior. It was the coolest car. And he had a quadraphonic 8-track sound system in that car. And air conditioning was Arctic. It was a nice ride. It was a very nice ride. It was one of the cars that I learned how to drive in. That was my automatic experience driving that car. The stick was an older Mercedes. Not that we had any money. We didn't have any money, you know, but he managed to find these cars that were pretty decent value. The light's a little weird today. So the stick was a very intriguing exercise. My father was demanding. He was like the worst. He taught other people how to drive. In fact, he actually became a professional driving instructor for a brief period of time. Very brief. So he taught other people how to drive, and they loved him. Oh, he was so great to me. He was so patient. Not to me. Are you kidding me? It was like, one of those afraid to make a mistake moment, But anyway, that 8-track quadraphonic sound system was the boss. I mean, at that time, he was really into switched on Bach, the electronic Wendy Carlos. I think back then, Wendy was Walter still. The two switched on Bach records. We'd listen to switched on Bach both 1 and 2. He was switched on Bach and switched on Beethoven. I think that was the second one. He was also really into Arthur Fiedler and the Boston Pops. It was interesting. Of course, I'd sneak in my 8-tracks, much to his chagrin. And at that time, I was listening to, I think I had, was starting my 8-track collection. I was around 13 years old, 14. I think it was 14. I was 13. I was 13 years old. And I started my 8-track collection, and I got, my first 8-tracks that I got were, let me see now. It was a graduation present, 8th grade graduation present. Like a little Sony 8-track cassette stereo. I loved it. That was great. And when we got it, my father said, why don't you buy 4 8-track tapes? I said, okay, I'll do that. So I went over to the 8-track tape section, and I saw a couple that I knew and that I wanted to get. One was The Captain and Me by the Doobie Brothers, who were very popular, in the San Jose band, by the way. That's where I grew up. And what else did I get? I think, did I get Southern Comfort by Leonard Skinner then? I might have. But I definitely remember 2 of the 4 besides the Doobie Brothers. And they were Cry of Love by Jimi Hendrix. And then I saw this very interesting image. It was and name. And the name of the 8-track cassette was Birds of Fire. And the group was the Mahavishnu Orchestra. I had no idea what the music sounded like, but I loved the cover, and I loved the name, Birds of Fire. And I looked at some of the song titles, and I'm like, okay, let's see. Sapphire Bullets of Love, Extraterrestrial Commuter, I'm in. I don't know what this thing is going to sound like, but the package is great, and the song titles are kind of where my head is at. And I went home and I put it on. It's like, that CD, that 8-track cassette changed my life. Absolutely changed my life. When I listen to John McLaughlin and those guys just go nuts. And I've listened to some of the other Mahavishnu records. That one's the best, by far. Absolutely by far. Yeah, YouTube is playing its games now. They're totally playing games. Played Birds of Fire on my college radio show. Always did a fusion set. I was a jazz fan growing at various stages of my life. And I remember the first time I really came across a jazz tune that grabbed my attention. It was a fusion track, and I think it was a freshman in high school. I was a freshman in high school, and some guy had a radio, which you weren't supposed to bring to school, by the way. And he was listening to the radio, kind of close to the quad area. We call it the quad. And he had it tuned to a radio station called KSOL, which was this AM soul station, broadcast out of San Mateo. That's where, by the way, Sylvester Stone, got his start. He was a DJ on KSOL. And then eventually he became Sly Stone. There's a little trivia for you. And I heard this music, and it was like, wow, this is amazing. And it was Jungle Waterfall by Return to Forever. And I actually heard the guy back announce and say the name, like, I'm getting this. So that started my foray into jazz fusion. And some of it is Drek, especially when you get into the sort of the smooth jazz stuff. Some of it's really good. Really, really good. I'm going to leave you guys a link today in the description for the show. And it's a live performance by George Duke, who is a keyboard player, tremendous keyboard player, who played, quite a bit with Frank Zappa, and it's his live band, and it's a live performance from Montreux, and I'm going to leave the link for a couple of reasons. Number one, it really is an anchor to another place in time. And when I started to listen to the track and watch it, it reminded me of things that we used to do. Not because I want to go back there, because I don't think we're ever going back there. Let's disabuse ourselves of that notion. But it reminded me of this idea of creativity and of spirit. And when you look at the band, it's a fusion band in really the greatest sense of the term, in that the members are very diverse. So there's a fusion of cultures and personalities, theoretical skin tones, right? So it really is true fusion music. And the song itself is really uplifting, just really, really uplifting. And Lee Ritenour is on guitar, and I think he's a very underrated guitar player. So the Mahavishnu Orchestra really opened my mind to a lot of different musical experiences and genres. And it was a great time. It was a great time. And Steve, you'll attest to that, because everything was, the 70s for me was all about synthesis, because there were all these hybrids of music that were coming together. You had country rock, southern rock, jazz fusion. You had progressive rock, and sometimes the hybrids wouldn't always work. You'd get something you'd listen to and go, yeah, it doesn't know what it wants to be, right? And other times you'd be like, man, this is spectacular. They were like, really get it. And that's when synthesizers really come onto the scene and become sort of manageable. You have the Moog, the Moog comes into play. You have clavier synths, things like that. Keyboard, even electronic keyboards were kind of a notch up from sort of the Hammond B3s and things like that, which aren't bad. They're quite good to listen to, quite nice, but it's just a different experience. So the electronics were starting to move into music. Some of the people were like, oh, I don't know electronics. But it was people could play. They could absolutely play. All right, I got one more musical thing to share with you, and then we're going to get into the show. So there's a really interesting documentary on YouTube. It's easy to find. It's on a band called The Turtles. Many of you are probably familiar with The Turtles, or if not, you're probably familiar with some of their songs. And these guys were pop music monsters, man. They were machines. They were great. The Turtles were great. And they're from Southern California. And they went from kind of a folky thing into a full-blown pop thing. And they had massive hits, really massive hits. Happy Together, of course, is probably one of their greatest hits. And there's an interesting piece at the end of that documentary. The documentary itself is fairly interesting, just about the story of the band, where music was, the various characters, so on and so on. But they talk about when they went on their first tour. I think it was their first tour. Or it was either their first tour or their second tour. It was very early on. And they were playing a Bob Dylan cover. And Dylan was there present in the audience. And he walked up to them and he said, hey, I really like that song you guys played there at the end. And they said, well, that was your song. You wrote it. And it's really odd. Like, why did he say that? And then I think it was Howard Kalin or Mark Volman. It was Mark Volman. He said, that's the phase when Dylan was running around with those big dark glasses. And I thought to myself, oh, that's interesting. So Dylan, I think that was, Dylan got into this car accident or motorcycle accident. Now, I'm not sure where that is on the timeline, but it's interesting in that he didn't even recognize the song. And why was he running around with these big dark glasses? There's always been a lot of mystery around Bob Dylan and who actually wrote Bob Dylan's songs. And I remember when I was at San Francisco Magazine back in the 1980s, there was this gal who was the girlfriend or a girlfriend of the publisher. And she claimed to know somebody who actually wrote Dylan's tunes, like the early genre breakers, right? The ones that put Dylan on the map. And it kind of went nowhere. You know, I was really into it. I was like, man, I talked to the editor, you got to publish this. This is great stuff, right? So fast forward, you guys know who Miles Mathis is. If you don't, he's interesting. I don't always agree with everything he says or writes. But he went into this whole thing about Dylan, like who really wrote Dylan's songs, because there's clearly a phase where the material is different than sort of the other material later on in the catalog. It's distinctly different. And the words are distinctly different, and they're better. Like the early stuff is much, much better. Now, you could say that artists atrophy with their creativity, and to some extent that's true. That said, Miles Mathis kind of went into this dive around who wrote Dylan's songs in the early phase of Dylan's career. And he basically sort of boiled it down to two people. One was Paul Simon, and the other was Leonard Cohen. And he really hit the bullseye on Leonard Cohen, because he was comparing Cohen's, semi-liturgic, religiously drenched symbolism to Dylan's material. Very similar in a lot of ways. And it actually makes a lot of sense that Cohen might have been the author of Dylan's early material. If you know anything about Leonard Cohen, he's a very, very complex individual, and somebody who is tied to what we would call the deeper state. There's the deep state, and then there's the deeper state. And I think that's where Leonard Cohen hung out, in the deeper state. And there's connections with McGill University, and the whole program there of MK Ultra experimentation. I interviewed Ann Diamond on my show. God, it was a long time ago now, seems like. And Ann had a relationship with Leonard Cohen through McGill. And she believes, and Ann's a really lucid person, and she believes that Leonard Cohen was her handler. And I think that could be, I think that could be true. Absolutely. She had a lot of details, and she's written about this on Henry McCow's site, if you want to look her up. So I had her on my show once, and we talked about this. And Cohen also was a member of the IDF, and he was a, to the marrow Zionist. Meanwhile, he's also a Buddhist priest, right? So Leonard Cohen's a complex character, very complex character. And if you ever want to see a very interesting documentary, check out Leonard Cohen at the Isle of Wight. And the Isle of Wight was probably like it's like, what's the end of the festival kind of experience? Is it Isle of Wight? Is it Altamont? They're probably close in their dark resonance. And there are a lot of people that are really having bad acid trips. I mean, the Isle of Wight seems like it was another one of these psychological operations. Bringing bad LSD in, observing, watching, and people were losing their minds at the Isle of Wight. I think it might have been Jimi Hendrix's last performance. It was either Isle of Wight or Atlanta Pop. I forget which one. But one of those two was Hendrix's last performance. Anyway, I think it's probably Isle of Wight. So people are losing their minds. And Leonard Cohen gets up there and he starts talking to people. He doesn't sing or anything. And it's pretty pretty clear that he's using neuro-linguistic programming techniques. And he literally puts the crowd into a trance. He puts them into a trance. And it's a very interesting thing to watch, to see how he can entrain this extremely large group of people. We're talking probably in the range of about 20,000 people, maybe more. And he tames them. He tames them like Siegfried and Roy, but without any violence, right? That's Leonard Cohen. He was a very, very complex individual. Anyway, there's a little music to start your 15 minutes of flame off with. All right, so shall we sanctify the moment? Shall we sanctify the moment? Let's do it. All right, yesterday, we had a little guest appearance from Reverend Bob, but he's not going to be here today. All right, so let's just take a little moment here, and really feels like we're on the precipice of something, right? There's a coalescence and a moment of dynamic events colliding in the near event horizon. And a lot of people have a great deal of anxiety and fear right now. And I want to kind of address that a little bit today here in the invocation, but also in the show itself. I'm going to go through a number of things. So why don't we just be consciously aware of the fact that people are stressed out, they're freaked out, some people are really scared. There's no rudder on the ship, and there's rumors upon rumors upon rumors, some of which we're going to get into today and try to shine some light into it and maybe take some of the edge off of it. So let's just keep that in mind today. And here we go. Dear blessed and holy Mother, Father God of the great central sun, within the universal light, which is the light of Yeshua Sananda Emmanuel. We ask that only the highest and best information, wisdom, and truth come through this channel at this time. And we send a heartfelt prayer out to everyone who is anxious, nervous, uneasy, fearful, depressed, unmotivated, and on the edge of perhaps some other reality than this one. We wish all of you to experience peace in your heart, calm, to be the center of the storm, to be able to act in the moment. And being to act in the moment is the art of living through fear, not without fear, but through fear. We ask that we have the opportunity to face our fear and to face it gracefully and to be able to transcend it so that we can be available to others in times of crisis, in moments of need. And for those who cannot or do not hear this transmission, may your hearts rest easy and know that in the end, everything will be balanced out. Everything will be balanced out. Have faith in that. Have trust in that. So be it. Let's go. All right. So the reason I brought this up is because I got a phone call yesterday. And if you're listening to the show, I will call you back. I'm not going to say who it is. I got a phone call yesterday, and somebody was really, really freaked out. Really freaked out. And I'm gonna just bring this topic right to the top, and it has to do with vaccinations. And the phone call I got was that by Thanksgiving they're going to be out and force vaccinating everybody. So the background here is that Trump has employed this guy Perna, General Perna, who has been his logistics general to deliver vaccines for Operation Warp Speed. Okay. And I'm not going to play the video, but he had basically a press conference where he said that there will be a 24-hour window where they will activate the vaccination process. And now he says that all Americans will be vaccinated within a 24-hour period. I don't know how that's possible, to be honest with you. I don't think that's really possible. I mean, to go into the hinterlands and track down everybody. I mean, you got people that are living in the Ozarks. You got people, living in, high altitude areas of Utah. I mean, there's only so many resources, physical, personal resources, that the military could throw at this idea of vaccinating the entire populace. Now, they may say, okay, well, we're going to go after the people who are most susceptible, and they may just do that, or they may say, hey, if there's an egregore or an evil mindset that has settled over this thing, they may just have a list and theoretically just go after those people. Now, I'm not saying that that's what they're going to do. I'm just trying to work this out of my head, right? Because it's almost physically impossible. They would need almost every single troop, not only in the Army, but the Navy and the Air Force. They'd have to combine all their troops in order to inoculate the entire country. I don't think it's possible. So the idea that within 24 hours everybody's going to be force vaxxed, I don't ascribe to that. Logistically, it's not possible. Now, that said, what else could be happening? What else could the Army and General Perna be doing at warp speed besides distributing vaccines? So I hope I'm not going to come off sounding like a Q-ophile, but there's things that are happening. So yesterday, this is important to understand now. Yesterday, Ezra Cohen Watnick, who apparently Q's been talking about this person for a while. I don't have the Q Cliff Notes or the Q minutes, but apparently this person's name, now he is now number 2. He's number 2, right below Christopher Miller, who is number 1. And Christopher Miller basically comes out of special ops, cybersecurity special ops. So this is a very different guy who is representing the role of the Secretary of Defense. Esper, bye-bye. So Christopher Miller does not come through, he's not a major West Point wonk, okay? He's a very different character. And he deals in 4th and 5th generation warfare. So we're talking cyber intelligence, cyber war, soft war. Now, Ezra Cohen Watnick does come from a more quote-unquote traditional military background. And it seems like in a typical kind of Trump fashion that they both represent sort of this flank, right? These two guys. One guy is going to be cybersecurity. The other guy actually knows how to pull the levers with the actual military deployment and disbursement. Now, they did something yesterday that is incredibly noteworthy. Essentially, what Trump did is he created a new division of the armed forces. So we have the Air Force, we have the Army, we have the Navy, and we have the Marines. I guess you could throw the Coast Guard in there. Those are the 5. So what he did is he made a new group, or a new battalion. I wouldn't call it a battalion. Just call it a group, and that's special ops. So what Trump has done is he's done an end around with the military because he was not getting any support from people like John Kelly or Mike Mattis. These are a lot of these guys are the guys that Kay Griggs talked about in her really important, very extensive and deep deconstruction of the U.S. military. And these are guys who are indoctrinated into a very different kind of ideology. So that guard, probably not the group that would be the most supportive to this current president. So what did he do? Basically created his own army. Now you could say, well, that could be really bad. Now he's got his own personal army. Well, you know, Obama had his own personal army too. And look what they did. They just kept those wars going. They went in and they, basically obliterated Libya. Right? They initiated Benghazi. I mean, so it's not as if having a traditional army would provide certain checks and balances to whoever is sitting in the White House. It doesn't really matter, right? If you are aligned with the military-industrial complex, you will do what you're told. Now, Trump has not done that. He's not done that. That's not to say that the record is blemish-free. We're still in Syria. We're still in northern Syria. What are we doing there? We have oil interests in northern Syria. But what we're not doing is we're not funding the ISIS troops. We're not doing that anymore. The SLA, Syrian Liberation Army, those guys, plus ISIS, ISIL, you don't hear about them anymore, do you? You don't hear about the massive destruction that's going on in Syria. I mean, the media could just be dialing it back, but you don't hear about it. You just don't. Now, we have a presence there. Again, I said it. It's in northern Syria. And do you remember, by the way, when we abandoned that area? Oh, my God, you can't do that. The Kurds, our friends, the Kurds. You're going to abandon the Kurds. They're all going to be slaughtered. Oh, my God. Did that happen? Because if it did, or even if it remotely looked like it happened, they'd be all over it. They'd be, they'd send their people out there. Didn't happen. I think sometimes it's important to take note of what did or didn't happen. And it was you get people like Lindsey Graham. We can't do that. Bullshit. Nothing happened. Maybe, who knows? Maybe they've got an issue with the Turks or whatever. It's like, look, that's been going on for a long time. And quite honestly, it's none of our business. It's really none of our business. We got a mess here in this country to deal with. But the doomsday for the Kurds never occurred. Now, Trump has ordered soldiers out of Afghanistan by January 15th. And you have Mitch McConnell saying, oh, it'll be terrible for morale. Really? Terrible for morale? Like, we have been in Afghanistan since just after 9/11. That war is the longest running war in American history. That war has been going on for 19 years. 19 years that war's been going on. And I guarantee you, they already had boots on the ground in Afghanistan prior to this. Say, hey, we're going to go there. Trust me. And what have we been doing there in Afghanistan for 19 years? Basically, we've been lording over, guarding over the opium trade. And this is where all the opium poppies are grown, right? So, okay, come home. We're going to bring these troops home. Well, that's interesting. That's very interesting. And it's right around the same time that Esmer was up in arms about everything. And Trump, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, had already pulled a large amount of troops home from Germany. So there's a major reorganization going on at this point in time. And the special ops thing is kind of a big deal. You may say, oh, well, who cares? Or I'll believe something. They don't do this stuff just to move the deck chairs on the Titanic. There's something going down. And here's what I think is going to happen. I think that they're probably going to deploy the special ops now. They can do it because, remember, Esmer did not grant Trump's wish to send troops out to defend certain areas. Remember, he sent the National Guard home. The National Guard was supposed to be in Washington, D.C. He sent them home. Sent them home. And in areas where they did deploy, they were deployed with no weapons. No weapons. Okay. He's gone. That guy's gone. So here's what I think is going to happen. I think they've got the goods. I think the server thing, I've really dove into this server thing, and I believe it to be a real event. Now, here's the details that I understand with the server piece. The server was in the American consulate in Frankfurt. In the American consulate in Frankfurt. So what happened? From what I understand, U.S. Marshals went in there and grabbed the servers. That said, this is what I've heard now. This part, the part that they have the servers, I believe they have the servers. Now, this part I can't verify or validate. So you have to, there's an asterisk with this, but I will share this with you, is that apparently there was some foreknowledge that this might happen. Here, things happen very quickly. So they brought some soldiers in from Afghanistan, of all places, to defend the consulate. And the rumor is that there was a firefight that went on. That's what I've heard. I can't verify it. And the other rumor is that Gina Haspel was there. So when they got the servers, they found also that one of the parties that was involved in the vote hack was British intelligence. This is a big deal. This is a very big deal. Now, I think they were able to like peg this thing to China as well. You know, China, of course, makes a good boogeyman, and who knows? It could be true. It could be very true. Power, money, influence, technology. There's only one other country that I know that checks those boxes, and it ain't this one. So, British intelligence is linked to this thing. That's a big deal. And as soon as this stuff started to come out, guess what happened? Bojo went into quarantine again. It's like, oh boy, you got issues there, brother. So I think they've got the goods. I think they have it all. And I think they have the CIA's involvement in on this thing. And this is why the special ops stuff has been elevated so that they answer to Watney Cohen, Christopher Miller, who answer to Trump. This is what's happening. And if I was on the left, who knows? Maybe it's all a big mind fuck and they're just going to go after, you know, the truth tellers. I don't really think that's the case, though. But if I was on the left, I'd be very concerned. So I think this is how I think this is going to play out. A lot of the election stuff, which I will, by the way, get into. I think a lot of the election stuff is a way for them to buy time. Like they are trying to put logistics into place to do something. And I think it's going to be fairly significant. So I think the first thing they'll wind up doing is that they will probably do a quick strike on any Antifa or BLM or related groups. Like they know who sort of the point people are inside of those groups. You know that they know that. I mean, they have probably the best surveillance technology in the fucking world. I mean, let's face it. Amazon, I could be talking on the phone with a friend about something, and then 5 minutes later, Amazon is throwing up ads on my phone about the exact same thing I was talking about. Okay, so if Amazon can do that, what do you think the so-called corporation government of the United States can do? A lot more. So I think what they're going to do is and it'll have to happen very, very quickly, is that they'll probably wind up deploying and taking out first and second tier, quote unquote, leaders or point people inside of those domestic terror groups. And they're domestic terror groups. They're going to take them out. Because what they want to do is they want to make sure that the chain of command from people who basically rent them and send them out into the streets is broken. They want to break the chain of command. Within a very short period of time after that, they'll drop the hammer. And I believe, put that in quotes, I believe that it will encompass a number of people and players that will be scandalous, absolutely scandalous. And I don't think the public is ready for it. I don't think they're ready for it. And this will be, this is going to be, we're rapidly approaching this event horizon in our theoretical linear time experience that is going to change the world. Okay, now I'll put a caveat with that. If it doesn't happen on the theoretical Trump side of the ledger sheet, it's going to happen with Klaus Schwab and the Fourth Industrial Revolution and all the planetary lockdowns. It's going to happen that way. So either way, we are at the cusp of a very different paradigm. The world will be very different post 1221. That's when we have the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction, because things will be in play and in place by then, more than likely. So if they do this, which it seems like this is how this thing is lining up, that they will go after and try to neutralize. And maybe this is where Perna and that whole scene comes into play. I don't know. I'm not going to sit here and try and sell you that. That's a big unknown for me. And I don't like to talk about things that I don't either know or have a very strong intuition so I can make a leap and, very calculated assessment. So I'm not gonna weigh in and say that's what he's here to do. I don't want to sell you a bill of goods on that, okay? But I do think this other thing with special ops is happening. It is real. And when that happens, it will happen very quickly. Very, very quickly. So they'll probably be deployed. They know who these people are. They know where they are. And they will take them out. And within 24 hours of that, the information will come. Because if they do it and they wait a week, then what will happen is that these, really, they are domestic terrorists. They're enemies of the state inside of this country, promulgated by both sides. Now, remember that it's not just the left thing. The right has some investment in it as well. So after that, then the bombs drop. And I'm talking figurative bombs, but it could be ugly. It could be very ugly, from public opinion to what might even happen on an international scale. Like, we're headed into a very different time. Very different time. So what do you want to do? How do you address this? Well, first of all, let's get back to this idea around fear, okay? We talked about it yesterday. Like, a certain amount of fear is kind of healthy. Too much fear is paralytic, okay? It's paralytic. So you have to go through that. You have to breathe through it. And you have to stay in the moment. You have to be prepared. The more prepared you are, the less you will act out of character or out of sync or out of rhythm. Okay. And I always tell the story about Reggie Wayne, who used to play with the Indianapolis Colts, really good football player. And I remember when, again, this was Hurricane Maria, I think, Florida. And I saw a tweet of his, and it's like, this is 11th hour shit. Like, it's on. And he says, trying to run around and find myself a generator. And it's like, I've told this story before. The guy's probably worth about 25 million bucks. You don't have a generator? And here you are in the midst of an oncoming freight train, and you're running around, in with this tropical storm breathing down your neck, trying to find a generator along with whoever else doesn't have a generator. You can't do that. Okay. So you want to make sure that you have things taken care of and covered, so that if this shit happens, if this shit hits the fan, you have a reasonable chance of getting through that moment. Okay. However long that moment is. If you don't, then you've got a very, I think, small window in order to try to, assuage your fear and be able to kind of get through whatever you need to get through, whether it's having enough water. And by the way, you have to have this stuff around anyway. If you live up north and you get hit with a massive snowstorm, like, what's going to happen? You're going to need to spend time inside. You may not be able to get to the market, especially now with all the, the COVID bullshit. So you got to have to, and every part of the country is susceptible to some form of natural disasters. I mean, in California, unfortunately, you got wildfires, you have earthquakes. In the South, we've got hurricanes. In the Midwest, you got the derecho and the tornadoes. I mean, there's plenty of Uranus and Taurus chaos around for everybody. So you need to just be prepared at that level. Boom, right? Then there's the other, and the other is the unknown. So you can, at the very least, sign off on, hey, look, we got to be prepared in case of a natural disaster, emergency, whatever. And if the other happens, well, guess what? You just shift all of your, assets and resources from that part of your mind to another part of your mind. Now, the difference is the mindset here, because there's this thing called the golden hour, which I've just been reading about. And the golden hour is the first hour in any crisis. Apparently, if you suffer a trauma, the chances of surviving are far greater if you get to a hospital within an hour. In even a minute after the hour, your chances of surviving drop precipitously. So the first hour of a crisis is really essential and really important. So if there is a crisis, if there is something that happens, if there is a national state of emergency, if they are messing with certain areas in terms of blackouts or stuff going on with the internet, the first thing that you want to do is not lose your head. You have to assess the situation very, very rationally. You also, and I talked about this before, you need to get to know your neighbors. If you don't know them, you better start, because these are the people that are going to be there in your vicinity if something happens, and you need to develop some level of trust with them. It's important. But it's that first hour. You don't want to do anything stupid in the first hour, right? You don't, but you have to assess things. You really have to assess things. Now, for some of you, you may say, I got to get out of this goddamn city. And that might be a really good thing to do. And you may have an hour to do it, right? You may have an hour to do it. And I'm not saying you should, but if that's what your intuition is telling you, and you have to check your intuition, you really have to check it. You have to check it. Is this fear? Is this fear? what level of fear, right? This is where being in the moment really, really is important. So when that happens, you have the golden hour. The decisions you make in the golden hour will pretty much determine how things unfold. Don't do anything stupid. Don't lose your head. Okay. I think a lot of the vote stuff and what's going on in the various cities and states, while it's real, it also is buying time. By the way, on Kamala Harris's Senate page, it still says she's a senator. It does not say vice president-elect. And the Biden campaign is doing outreach for $30 million so they can fight these lawyers that the other side is bringing to the table. I want to show you an interesting development here. So I can find this thing. Okay, so I'm not necessarily a huge fan of this guy. He comes out of naval intelligence, but he's been around the Trump camp for a while. This is Jack Posobiec. And this is what's happened here. Breaking: Wayne County, Michigan election board Republicans rescind votes to certify file affidavits that their families were threatened. So this is the actual affidavit, if I'm not mistaken. Let me go back here. Give me a second. Didn't need to do that. So if you have been following the story in Michigan, Wayne County, there were two Republican election officials who witnessed what was going on, and they were not going to certify the vote. They came right out and said that. 2 days ago, they had a change of mind. Why? Because they were harassed and threatened. And this is the change of mind is on the public record. Okay. So what happened? Why did they rescind their position? I'll tell you what happened. Somebody from the Trump administration went up there and said, "We've got your back. We've got your back. Hello, special ops." Right? Now they can send a couple special ops guys out there to watch over these people. Guard them 24/7. We're going to give you protection. That's exactly what happened. So now they've rescinded. They've rescinded that. So we're in a very interesting game now. Very, very interesting game. One side is trying to use this is like a turf war. What we're watching are two rival gangs, sort of battle it out right now. And I do believe there is a difference between the two. Although, what is the goal? The goal might be to get us to get into one paradigm that the organizers of the gang and the game want us to get into, regardless of what side. But let's put that aside for now. We're just going to look at it as it plays out. That happened. That's a thing. That is a thing. And there's more. There's actually a lot more happening. So we have what happened with Watnick Cohen and essentially making special ops the sixth branch of the military. You have the electors in Michigan who have rescinded now. And I could go through and bring you a number of posts about the discrepancies with the votes getting dumped. Georgia is a big deal. It is a really, really big deal. And you may not believe in voting. You may not believe in the system, okay? But what's going on in Georgia is significant. Because there are two Senate seats that are headed for basically a runoff. Like they're in the balance. These Senate seats are in the balance. And it's not just the votes for president, but it's the Senate. And if these two senators do not, and they're either Republican or Democrat, They don't get in. The Republican side don't get in. They don't get in. Then guess what will happen? That means that if Biden and Harris are in, they'll have the presidency, they'll have the Senate, they'll have the House, and they will pack the courts. And they've already said they're going to do that. And they'll bring in Washington, D.C. and Puerto Rico as the 52nd state, 51st and 52nd states. It's going to happen. If that occurs. Now, if Trump somehow becomes president and these two wind up going into and the left gets the Senate, so that's a Gordian knot, because Trump can veto just about anything at that point. So it's kind of a package deal. They both either have to go together or they don't go together. And if there's been voter irregularity in places, like for instance, you go to some of these states and it's a straight Republican ticket, but not for president, right? Not for president. And the number I've been hearing is that Trump got 400,000 electoral college votes. Oh, I'm sorry, 400, not 400. 400 electoral. I believe that to be true. I think that that's quite true. I think it was a massive, and I mean massive, takedown of the Biden campaign in the election. Massive. Which is why they had to go all in. They had to stop the election. Because these things are fluid, right? They're reading the counts as they go along. If the election was closer, then they may have had to resort to different measures. Or maybe they wouldn't have to pull out all the stops, but it wasn't. And so they literally had to stop everything. It's like, we've got to stop the bleeding and we got to figure out how we're going to go to plan C or plan D and, flip this thing. That's exactly what happened. Anyway, we're at a real crossroads here. And again, what I really want to stress is for everybody to do your best to put your anxiety and deep, deep fear, not the fear that keeps you attuned to what's going on, but the deep fear that paralyzes you. You've got to work through that. You have to work through that, because the other thing is in the spiritual dimension, right? We have these disembodied entities that feed off of all that stuff, and this is the golden corral for them right now. So you have to deny them, what they are feasting on. And I ran across a really great video podcast last night, and I want to have this woman on the show. Her name is Sherry Swiney, Swiney, and I'm going to put a link to this podcast in the show page. I think it'd be very helpful for a lot of you. And the host of the show is actually a very interesting character named Mark Windows. And it has to do with dealing with thoughts that are not your own and how you break the cycle of those things. Because we have to silence those voices of not self at this point in time. They have no legitimacy in our brains. So I'm going to link to that video. It's worth listening to, trust me. If you're somebody who's plagued by an inability to stay in the moment or stay focused, or have random thoughts, dark thoughts going in and out of your head, you need to listen to this video. It's actually a podcast. You don't have to watch it. You just put it on in the background. So I'm going to link to that. I'm going to try and get this woman on as a guest, because we need some tools here to get through this time. It's important. So do your best, your absolute best, just to stay present. Don't go flat. Don't check out. You don't want to go too far in that direction. You want to just be right in the center, right? Right in the center. Do whatever it takes to do that. So there's some other topics that I want to talk about, but I need to build them out a little bit more. One of the things that I've heard again, I need to put an asterisk with this, so it's a disclaimer, that Dominion has been involved in, guess what, COVID-19 cases. Think about that for a moment. I'm going to do a little more research on that. And if I can put something together, I'll bring it into the show tomorrow. I'll be talking about human design tomorrow as well. And as a understanding as to how your own sort of type in human design can be another reference point for you to be able to understand how you move through the world. Okay, so I'm going to bring that up tomorrow. But if there's more information that I can circle back with this Dominion and the COVID crisis and the software and the tracking and the data, I'll see if I can do that. Okay. All right. I think I'm just going to go for about an hour today. But I did want to show you another thing that I think is really interesting. Really, really interesting. So this photo of Klaus Schwab started making the rounds. I got to show you. You guys probably have seen this. If you haven't seen it, I'm going to show you. And it's kind of significant in some ways. And I'll show you why. So there he is. Now, this is how this guy is addressing the world. I mean, what fucking fantasy world is he living in? It's like now he's living out this kind of idea that he's some techno lord, some dark techno lord. This guy's a comic book character. I mean, he's a comic book character. Now, I would say he's a caricature, but I think you need to listen to what he has to say because it's quite important for you to understand it. So I got a good chuckle out of this. It's like, you got to be kidding me. So then I started to look at the symbols here. What's going on here? What has he got? And there are two reoccurring symbols. One is what looks like to be the ox, right? That looks like an ox. Next year is the year of the ox. All right, file that away. Then we have what looks, now I'm not sure if this is a cross or not. It could be. It could be a cross. It could also be, because I don't have it set to zoom. It could also be like a starlight, right? But let's say for all intents and purposes, it is a cross. This is a symbol that I'm not really going to get into right now. The one that I am going to get into is this. This is a 9-pointed star. So I had to ask myself, well, what is the significance of a 9-point star? And he's repeating it here as well. See that? Why is it in this crest? So one of the things that I've talked about before is the New World religion. And the religion that I think that has been tabbed for the New World religion, the religion to replace Christianity, to replace Islam, maybe replace Judaism, I don't know, is Baha'i. I've been talking about this for a while. Why? Because it's syncretic and it encompasses all those Abrahamic faiths into one container, right? So remember that. So I decided to do a little research on the 9-pointed star. Let's have a look at that. Where are we? What website is this? Bahaipedia. The 9-pointed star. The number 9, which in itself is the number of perfection, is considered by the Baha'i as sacred because it is symbolic of the perfection of the Baha'i revelation which constitutes the ninth in the line of existing religions, the latest and fullest revelation which mankind has ever known. The eighth is the religion of the Bab, and the remaining seven are Hinduism, Buddhism, Zoroastrianism, Judaism, Christianity, Islam, and the religion of the Sabians. These religions are not only the only true religions that have appeared in the world, but are the only ones still existing. What about Mormonism? Isn't that a religion? Maybe it's not a true religion, but it's still existing. There have always been divine prophets and messengers, to many of whom the Quran refers. But the only ones existing are those mentioned above. The Guardian feels that with intellectuals and students of religion, the question of exactly which are the 9 existing religions is controversial, and would be better to avoid it. He does not want the friends to be rigid in these matters, but use their judgment and tact. Sometimes one statement is exactly the right thing for one type of mind, and the wrong thing for another. Oh, the Guardian, huh? Okay. That's not the English newspaper, by the way. Strictly speaking, the 5-pointed star is the symbol of our faith, as used by the Bab and explained by him. The Guardian does not feel it wise or necessary to complicate our explanations of the temple by adding this. 9 is the highest digit, hence symbolizes comprehensiveness, culminations. Also, the reason it is used in the temple's form is because 9 has exact numerical value of the Baha'i in the numerology connected with the Arabic alphabet. And Baha'i is the name of the revealer of our faith, Baha'u'llah. Baha'u'llah. The 9-pointed star is not part of the teachings of our faith, but only used as an emblem representing 9. In telling people of the 9 religions of the world, that is, existing religions, we should not give this as the reason the temple has 9 sides. This may have been an idea of the architect and a very pleasing idea, which can be mentioned in passing, but the temple has 9 sides because the association with 9, with the perfection, unity, and Baha. Okay? So it goes on. These are the other symbols. We have the ringstone symbol, the greatest name, and the Heikal. In a letter to the Temple Guides Committee dated 5 December 1944, the Guardian Secretary stated on his behalf that the 9-pointed star is not a symbol of the faith in any special sense. Okay? We want to point that out. The 9-pointed star is not a symbol of faith in any sense, that the cross is the symbol of Christianity. It's interesting here because they're saying it's not a symbol, but it is a symbol, right? Because it represents perfection and order and completion. And they're saying that it's that it does represent the 9 religions, right? And the Baha'i being the latest of the 9 great religions. So I think there's a little bit of duplicity here on their part. If you go back, you can see, right, the Baha'i symbol of the 9. It is the Enneagram in geometry, so those are the 9 personality types. Religious symbols, Baha'i, the Baha'i symbol of the 9, the 9-pointed star, ancient symbols. Okay, so let's go back to our friend, Dr. Doom, just to bring this back home again. I believe this is it. There it is, right there. Right? There's your 9-pointed star, 9-pointed star. And then we have, looks like the oryx or the ox and the cross above the head of the ox. I'm going to look at that one, try to get some more understanding around this. So what is really going on here? I think what Mr. Schwab is doing is he is presenting this symbol as a precursor to the world's new religion. This is what's going to happen. In order to get everybody on the same page, they're going to have to bring a new religion into people's midst, right? Because they don't want people fighting anymore. We're not going to have any of that with the Great Reset. So in order to do that, they're going to remake people. They're going to remake everything, including religion. So I think he's literally telling you that this is going to be the new world faith, Baha'i. It's the 9-pointed star. Let's see, what do we have here? Triads are used in this realm all the time. Antinomians are against imposed laws. Nomos is Greek. What is the symbol underneath the bull and the star? That is it's like a scroll, and sorry, I don't have the greatest. Let me see if I can do this. Don't have the greatest clarity on this thing. There's a. Let me tell you what. I'm going to come back to that scroll. It is a scroll, and there are 3 words on there. So tomorrow I'll come back and I'll break down. I'll break down the scroll, and I'll spend a little more time with the ox, with the cross above its head. But I think this is. I think they're telling you with the 9-pointed star that there is a spiritual and religious plank or religious arm to this thing, and it is Baha'i. But I've been talking about this for a long time. So I think this is what Mr. Schwab is going to be selling. I like capes. Yeah, we should have Klaus Schwab Day. We could all walk around dressed like a version of Klaus Schwab. That would be fun. Every day is Halloween with Klaus Schwab. Tree of Life, 9 to 10. The Baha'i deny the existence of Satan and the devil. You would know that. Ryan has circulated through some very interesting circles. What is he saying? What is Sigurd saying? Yeah, 9. 9 is the number. It's the end. It's the end of everything, right? You're going to vote vapid perennialism for extra Amazon store credit. Wearing gray, the color of Alpa, cast in Brave New World. Ooh, nice one. JMP7 reminds me of iPet Goat. And will it be based in Astana? That's interesting. That is an interesting comment or observation. Let's do a quick search here. Give me 1 second. All right. The answer to your question is a good question, Steve. It's a very good question. But the answer to it is no. You want to know where it is? I'll show you. The Baha'i World Center is the name given to the spiritual administrative center of the Baha'i faith. The World Center consists of the shrine Baha'u'llah near Accra, Israel, the Shrine of the Bab, and its gardens on Mount Carmel in Haifa, and various other buildings in the area, including the Ark buildings. Much of the international governance and coordination of Baha'i faith occurs at the Baha'i World Center. The Universal House of Justice, representing the supreme governing body of the Baha'i faith, resides in Haifa. The Baha'i World Center is also the current destination for Baha'i pilgrimage. There you go. So no. Not Kazakhstan, Israel. Haifa. There you go. Let's see. What else do we have? The antidote to Baha'i is having the true narrative of humanity. Studies in comparative mythology point to an understanding throughout many places the world that was infiltrated by an outside force. So we're talking about the Archons. We're talking about the archonic influence, right? These would be considered the fallen ones, who are mostly non-corporeal. But I'm assuming that there are people amongst us who might show characteristics of that, especially when their eyes do funny things. So yes, you're right. You're right about that. And I'm hoping, so I'm going to leave a link to that video. That it's a podcast. It's really good. It's really, really good. It's called Through the Keyhole. It's with Mark Windows and Sherry Swiney. I'll put that there. And Steve is working on getting Sherry Swiney on the show. We were exchanging notes this morning. He was actually already following her. So it's a good synchronicity. And it does have to do with dealing with the idea of these fallen ones who probably assemble themselves as the conductors of, the egregore network, and, creating these egregores, or these collective minds, these dark clouds that sort of move around and settle upon humanity. So the way to go about defeating them is to get them out of your head, right? That's the way. And you put that together with some of the stuff that Jared Murphy was talking about on Friday about what's inside of us. And we can re-engineer, I think, not only our exit strategy out of this bardo, but we might also bring a level of mastery to this plane of existence that can not only help us here, but wherever we go from this point forward. Because I think that, we've been sold a bill of goods. And every time we get to a point where we're about to wake up, guess what happens? We get a reset. So it's all out there right now. And these are really, in a lot of ways, these are really exciting times. Because we are right up against the third rail. Right up against the third rail. We're right on the edge of things. We're on the edge of complete tyranny, complete techno-fascism. We're on the edge of a major paradigm shift. If that gets, turned over, spun around, on an individual level, we're confronting a lot of things that bring things up for us, really trigger us so we can get through this. And then we're looking deeper. We're going deeper to really understand and try to find some solutions to how we're going to not just navigate through this, but get better, right? Get better to try to, we've got our own better back, and it's not theirs. It's not theirs. As I sit here today at the ripe young age of 60, I look at my life, and it took me probably about 58 years to kind of like cycle through a lot of shit, okay? 58 years. And it would be a hell of a waste if, the next 10 years of my life or 15 years or what, according to Zeke Emanuel, who's 75, says, I'm 75 and I'm going to die. And here's why I'm going to die. And if I'm going to die at 75, then you should die at 75. I don't want to die at 75. If I did it, whatever, right? Quality of life, the next 15 years were light speed and there was a lot happening and a lot of integration. Hey, whatever, right? But it's like, I wouldn't mind living to be 150. I'm being honest about that. I wouldn't mind being 150 because it's taken me about 58 years to kind of figure things out. And, cut through a lot of the bullshit and remove a lot of the programs from my head. And now it's like, okay, let's get going. Let's get going. And I do believe that that's our birthright. You go back and you look at how long these people lived in the Bible, man. They were living 300 years by the time they got to Abraham, who was like, what, 115, 120? Like, he was a degraded copy. So that's there. And there's a lot of other things that are there for us. And what do they want to do now? They want to hit us with a vaccine. Want to hit us with a vaccine, and they want to make sure that we don't get there. That's exactly what the vaccine is about, and more, a lot more. That's why there's such a rush, because we're waking up. And if we wake up, guess what? We'll be on an equal playing field with these people who have been making up the rules and asserting the order and asserting the authority. We'll be on a level playing field with them, and they won't like it very much. One of my favorite movies of all time, and I know a lot of you have seen it, is Dark City. If you want to understand the kind of the allegory of the time that we're in, watch Dark City. Because the Archons do play a role in that movie. And the outcome of the film is quite positive. And I'm glad they never made a sequel to Dark City. All right. I'm out of here for today. You guys take care. Once I was 120 years old. It's never too late for a repeat performance. Okay, I'll be back tomorrow with Jordan Fultz in the first hour. He's always has a lot of interesting things to say. And in the second hour, we'll get into some human design, and I'll circle back and look at those two symbols on the Schwab World Economic Forum Fourth Industrial Reset crest. Okay? All right. I'll leave the link to that podcast as well. But check it out. Some good information in there. All right. Use your head in order to discern what's real, your heart to save what's possible. Thank you for being here today. If you like the show, want to support it, there's a link there. Let's just keep it together. Let's hold the line. All right. Take care.